WCNC Charlotte. This is Flashpoint, where power and politics collide, and the tough questions get asked and answered.
Hey folks, welcome to Flashpoint here on WCNC Plus. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ben Thompson, joined by Julie Kate. Today we're talking about the General Assembly back in session as of this past week. It seems like the budget, ever elusive as it is here in North Carolina, remains to be that way. And we're going to talk to Chris Cooper from Western Carolina. He's a professor there, get his insight and analysis and predictions as well about what he thinks is going to happen.
Or what's not going to happen.
Or what's not going to happen is probably more accurate.
More likely,
right,
depending.
Right,
yeah.
right.
Short session, you never know how short it's actually going to be. Also spoke with a lawmaker from here in Mecklenburg County earlier this week, just touching base about first week back, different committees that she's a part of, Representative Laura Budd, and so we'll have a clip from that interview as well.
All right, first up, though, our interview with Chris Cooper. Take a listen. Joining us now on Flashpoint, Chris Cooper from Western Carolina University. Chris, good to see you again. Thanks for coming back.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, so General Assembly is back in session, supposed to be the short session, supposed to be. What, in your view, are sort of the must-do things? Because they get a lot of flack about what they don't get done. What are the must-do things that these lawmakers have to get done?
What do they have to get done? I think what we've seen is absolutely nothing. Say it again, right? I mean, so this is last cycle, you know, if we'd had this conversation in the long session, you say, what's one thing they got to get done? I'd say, well, they got to pass a budget. Well, they didn't do that last cycle. So presumably they will do that in the short session, but there is no guarantee, as we've seen. Ever since the McCrory administration, rules changed. So now if we just operate on the old budget, if they don't pass a new one, so there's really nothing they have to do.
I think the last time they passed a full budget was 2.5 years ago, something like that. Explain, what does this mean for the average person watching us right now? Why does this matter?
Yeah, so it matters because things get more expensive, right? I don't have to tell anybody watching that, right? You know, things are getting more expensive at the grocery store. They're getting more expensive everywhere. The state is growing. So whatever services government is providing, the number of people they're providing that service to is growing, but the budget is staying the same. And so what that means is no raises for teachers. That means no raises for other state employees. We do operate on the old state budget, though, right? This is not the federal government. We have a shutdown. The good part about that is we don't have a shutdown. The bad part about that is if they decide not to pass a budget, as the Republican House and Senate have not been able to come together, then we just operate on the old. Despite the fact things are getting more expensive, we don't get any more money.
At what point do they just start working on the next budget cycle? At what point is there a give up moment? At what point is there just okay, we're just going to keep passing these mini budgets and wait for the next time?
Yeah, I think we don't really know, right? You know, my guess is we're going to continue to talk about the budget. The signs seem to suggest maybe they will come to agreement, but we got to remember, right? So we have no idea what Phil Berger looks like when he is in a lame duck term, right? For the last 16 years, we've known Phil Berger as President Pro Tem of the Senate, going to be in next cycle as well. Now we got a very different Berger. Does that mean he is more open to pass a budget, or does that mean he has nothing left to lose, and so he's going to hold more firm? I think we just really don't know. It's an uncomfortable position to be in, and it's not a very satisfying answer to say we don't know, but we really don't.
Here's one of the interesting things to me that I think people might not realize is that this is not the result of politics as usual, as far as, oh, Democrats are being obstructionists or Republicans are being obstructionists and they're stopping progress. You have Republicans in control of the entire, both chambers of the General Assembly, and they can't get on the same page. You know, parties like to tout, oh, when they're in control, both houses, they can get things. No, Democrats aren't even a consideration here. It's that the two Republican chambers can't agree, and that's why we are where we are.
That's exactly right. So there's an old line in politics that the other party is the opposition, the other chamber is the enemy. And I think that's really what we're seeing here, right? So we have Governor Stein, obviously a Democrat, has said, look, I'll sign the House budget if you give it to me. That's the House Republican budget. It's the Senate here that is the one that's saying, no, we are not going to agree with this. So you're absolutely right. This is not partisan politics that we're used to. This is the Democrats in the House and the Democratic governor saying, we kind of like the House budget. The state Senate saying, we really don't.
And this is a lot of it comes down to the pace at which tax cuts happen. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So part of this, there's some sticky issues like the Children's Hospital, where the Senate has taken a different stance than the House. But a lot of this is about taxes, right? And so the Senate and the House have always seen things very differently in terms of how conservative we should be as a state. Essentially, the Senate will accuse the House of being a little bit too aggressive on spending, and the House obviously accuses the Senate of being the opposite. And so, yeah, it's about spending, it's about taxes. To some degree, it's about the Children's Hospital. But I think it really illustrates the difference between this 50-member Senate and this 120-member House.
I think it's interesting to just to put in perspective how long this has been going on. They've disagreed about multiple different things. I remember we've talked before about it being about Helene funding, like maybe a year and a half ago. That was the big disagreement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly right. So the playing field shifted a little bit as far as what they are disagreeing with, but the bottom line for the average voter is they are disagreeing. And this is where it gets interesting too as we look towards November. Not everything is or should be about elections, but at the same time, it's pretty clear through survey after survey after survey, voters seem to be blaming the Republicans here. Voters understand the Republicans are in charge of both chambers. And I think the incentive for the Republicans to try to get together may be what's coming in November. Obviously, if the voters blame the Republicans for the lack of a budget, or lack of a new budget, we should say, that might spell some trouble for the Republicans. I don't think they're going to lose majorities in either chamber, but the supermajority certainly is on the table to be lost.
So you got the budget. What else are you following out of the General Assembly this session?
Yeah, so Helene funding is another key piece of this, right? So there's been sort of a promise that there's been more funding coming to the West. Folks seem to agree. I think that's going to happen. There's the possibility of, I think like Julie referred to, mini budgets that we sometimes see. So these would be like little small carve-outs. There's also some discussion about the potential for a constitutional amendment that would limit localities' abilities to levy property taxes, sort of putting limits on those. So the General Assembly saying, hey, voters, would you like to have, an assurance that your local government won't raise your property tax too much? There's this lingering question, too, that's smaller in some ways, but a lot of folks, and I'll put myself in this category, have looked at the literacy test in North Carolina for a long time. This is a Jim Crow era provision that's still in our state constitution that says you have to be literate to vote. It was racist when it was put in during the Jim Crow era. Everybody agrees. There appears to be a little bit of a movement to maybe get a constitutional amendment on the ballot about that in November. We'll see if that moves.
You brought up Phil Berger. Sort of a lame duck at this point headed into the session. We don't know how that dynamic might shift things at the General Assembly. He spoke this week. A takeaway I saw was basically he blamed Democrats for his loss because he said Democrats like to vote in some Republican primaries. We know that that's not technically true. Unaffiliateds can vote in Republican primaries, but registered Democrats can't. What do you think this next few months is going to be like for him and his impact on the state of North Carolina?
Yeah, and I'll sort of pick up real quick on that interview. He also said that he thought 17 days was too long for early voting. So implying that, as we think about things that might happen, perhaps there could be some curtailing of early voting. But this is going to be, I think, as you said, sort of a legacy securing moment for Phil Berger. He has been the most powerful politician in our state since the Republican takeover of the General Assembly in 2010, when he got into leadership in 2011. I think he's going to probably want to do some things to secure that legacy. His legacy, as he sees it, is about lower taxes. It's about sort of fiscally responsible financial decisions. I think he also sees himself as somebody who has helped remake public education, higher education in particular. So I might expect to see some bills there. But yeah, this is the kind of term that that could define how we think about Phil Berger moving forward. Last thing to think about with Phil Berger is right now he says he's holding on. He's going to be in office through the end of his term. North Carolina, we have this 6-month cooling off period. In other words, if you want to become a lobbyist, you have to quit your legislative job 6 months before you start becoming a lobbyist. He says he's not going to do that, but there's going to be a lot of eyes on Phil Berger and his decisions about 6 months before the next session starts.
I want to switch topics just a little bit. As long as I have been doing Flashpoint, which is about 10 years, I have tried, although failed, to get people to care about gerrymandering, because I don't. You know better than I do. It's such an important but understood dynamic in American politics. But we did see it play out this week. And it got more attention than it typically gets because of voters in Virginia following suit with what other states like North Carolina, Texas, California have done. Explain to everybody, if they're new to this conversation, and the best way you know how, because you teach this for a living, what is gerrymandering and why do we care?
Well, gerrymandering is drawing lines to benefit your party at the expense of the other party. Simplest way I know how to explain it. Why do we care? Why does it matter? Because it can determine who and which party are in power. So if we look at Virginia is a great example. Right now, Virginia has 11 congressional districts, 11 seats, 6 Democrats, 5 Republicans. Seems pretty fair for a purple to light blue state. They're going to go to 10-1. In other words, 10 Democrats and 1 Republican. Has anything changed in the national scene? No. Has the district lines changed? Yes. The only thing that's changed is how they're drawing these districts. So this is absolutely critical to understanding how we're represented in Congress. In addition to the partisan stuff, you just got the reality of how you follow politics, right? This stuff's complicated. Which district number are you in for the state house, the state senate, and Congress, and who represents you? In North Carolina, they changed that, it seems like, all the stinking time. And so what that means is it's just hard to pay attention. It's hard to follow. This, I'm with you. I'm joining the chorus of people that say we need to pay more attention to gerrymandering because it matters for how we're represented and what we get out of government.
I give it a different name. Maybe
Yeah,
people
maybe, yes.
pay more attention.
Right. Yeah, based on what you've seen, I mean, and any polling out there, do voters seem to care? Does this resonate with them?
Look, voters say they don't like gerrymandering, and there's been lots and lots and lots of polls, some locally done at Catawba College, some done at Winthrop University, that will show that, right, consistently. Do you like gerrymandering? No, I don't. But the devil's in the details. It's a really hard nut to crack. Right now, there is a bill that was introduced in the General Assembly just yesterday that would introduce a nonpartisan independent redistricting committee in North Carolina. I think that has about the best chance of passage is, the General Assembly deciding that we're going to name UVA the state basketball team that we prefer, right? It's not going to happen. It's not going to move. The reason it's not going to move is that people in power don't like to give up that power. Right now, the General Assembly in North Carolina draws our districts with complete control. The governor, you and me have the same power over those maps, which is to say none. There is no veto power over redistricting. So I don't think we're going to see much movement. The people claim not to like it, but it's hard to really signify in a state with no direct democracy any way out of the problem.
Speaking of things that have not been moving, we got a couple things in the veto override garage that people really care about. Permitless concealed carry, I know some related to DEI. Do you expect any movement on any of those anytime soon, or do you think they're going to stay in that garage for a while?
I think we're going to see some movement on some of those. I don't know about the DEI bill, but I think some of these others, we may see some movement. Why is that? I think the primary reason is there are a number of Democrats, including those in the Charlotte area, who were recently voted out of office. They lost their primary. They're not going to be back. They're not happy with the Democratic Party. They're probably not real happy with Governor Josh Stein. And so they, in some ways, were, lost their seats because they challenged the party. I think they might be a little more likely to challenge the party now after what happened to them just last month.
And just finally, to skip back around real quickly on the gerrymandering, you mentioned the independent commissions. When you talk to people, I always hear people say, well, there's not really any, perfect way of doing this as far as a remedy. But I would suggest that still doesn't mean we should stop trying. In your view, the independent commissions, is that the best way? What's the best resolution? Knowing that it's not perfect, that not everybody's going to agree, what's the best solution?
Yeah, look, it's not perfect. Nothing's perfect. But this system we have isn't working and it's bad. Can we improve? Absolutely, we can. The John Locke Foundation's put forward some proposals that are about kind of limiting the data and information that folks can use when drawing these maps. That would help. I do tend to think independent, nonpartisan redistricting commissions, when implemented well can actually do a lot to sort of solve or at least address some of these problems. The gerrymandering, and study after study after study has shown this. The ones that work well, the good ones, they do actually reduce partisan bias. They do actually produce more compact districts, so ones where you're a little bit closer to home, and they produce districts that last longer. So all the outcomes we want, you do seem to see those in these independent, nonpartisan redistricting commissions implemented well.
All right, Chris Cooper from Western Carolina. Chris, thanks for coming on. As always, we appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, more Flashpoint after this.
Welcome back to Flashpoint. Of course, we're talking all things General Assembly this week, big week, and this is going to air starting Sunday morning. So
Yep.
hopefully things don't change. It's currently Thursday afternoon, so knock on wood, but bear in mind that this is being filmed a little bit early. But I did want to show you guys a clip from my interview with Representative Laura Budd. She's a Democrat here from Mecklenburg County, and we talked basically about everything we chatted with Chris Cooper about just a few minutes ago, and specifically how it impacts Mecklenburg County. There's a part of the Zoom that gets a little wonky, and so I'm going to chop that out. But take a listen.
Do you think that's something that's even going to get tackled in the short session?
The promises are we're going to have a budget. The rumor mill running at full tilt is we will have a budget. I'm not convinced that the budget is not going to be a series of small budgets or what I would call line item pork barrel items for special interest. But we in fact need a budget. The reality is we are in 2026 working on 2023 dollars. And if it was non-reoccurring funding, like a one-time funding in 2023, it's gone now. They've had no money since then. So we're hearing we'll have a budget, but we'll see.
I mean, just on a point of clarification, we were talking in the newsroom yesterday. If a budget, I mean, is it getting to the point where like you said, you just pass mini budgets and then start working on the next one? Because we're getting to the point where the next one needs to be the conversation.
I would agree wholeheartedly. We're getting to the point where the next one needs to be the focal point of where we're looking and targeting for development. And that is, in short, that's a problem because that means that we didn't address issues over the last 2 years we needed to address, and we've kicked the can down the road. And if you use the DMV as the redheaded poster child, as usual, it didn't get what it needed in the last biennium. So we've compounded the problem we're going to try to address in the next biennium. And the same goes for the schools, the Department of Transportation, Department of Health and Human Services. And that is the worry, right? It's a series of small budgets, or they only address tiny line items or a special interest project. And we haven't actually addressed the needs of North Carolina.
I know that Democrats are in, a position of limited power. But what would you like to see happen if you could prioritize, anything beyond the budget or in the budget? What are your priorities this short session?
I think within the budget context, which is where we need to be, excuse me, which is where we need to be on this, it needs to be a really hard look at viewing taxes, where we spend the state's revenue, as an investment back into the state, the communities, and the people. It needs to be less about where can we cut corners, where can we do it the most cheaply, because that's not always the most efficient or effective way to do it. And so I think that conversation at the 30,000 foot view needs to be held. So the understanding is it's an investment back into the state and its people. And it is not about how cheaply can we do this because we made poor financial decisions in the decades past, which they've had control since 2010. So if we're being realistic, the cliff we're sitting on, the fiscal cliff, is not the responsibility of the Democratic Party. It's the responsibility of the Republican Party. But blame needs to go, like we've done. The blame game's not going to help. It needs to be a realistic assessment of where we are and an honest conversation about where we want to go so that we can figure out how best to get there.
How do you hope Mecklenburg County shows up this short session? I know there's a lot going on here. What are your priorities for Mecklenburg County?
Priority for Mecklenburg County is to keep the public interest across the state focused on us and how we address things like the I-77 toll lanes that are the topic of conversation, because I think it's, for purposes of this conversation, it's not so much about should we have the toll lanes or should we not. It is about the public interest in a $1 billion+ infrastructure project and why transparency and accountability from the state government, the local government, and its agencies is so important. Because when you fail to take all of those pieces into account, and you've created a mess, as you're aware, with the I-77 South issue. But I think that's one of the things for Mecklenburg that we need to keep the focus on. And the other one is it's coming into the forefront, but it's towing back up in the headlines again. And this has to do with the influence of certain legislators or lobbyist associations in how laws are interpreted and applied. And what we've got now with the issue on towing is private property owners who have contracts with tow companies that are lawful, they are not predatory, and they are looking to remove commercial vehicles off their property that are parked unlawfully. Now the tow drivers are being arrested. It's considered a crime. That is not the intent of the legislation, which was vague in the first place, but it was certainly not the legislative intent that came out of the GOP in a Senate bill last year. And so those are the kinds of things where I think Charlotte Mecklenburg can show up and say, no, this is how you do it. You do it the right way.
Is that when it comes to towing, a legislation change, or is that an enforcement issue?
So it's some of both. So the towing legislation that I ran with Representative Carson Smith, who's in the Republican Party, and we ran it for the second time last year. We're going to run it again this year. It was a comprehensive reform, a regulatory bill of sorts. And because of the no budget, it didn't go anywhere when it got to the Finance Committee. And so there was the opportunity to take two provisions on commercial trucking that the Commercial Truckers or Trucking Association wanted. And they had another representative, Mike Sheetzel out of Wake County, run that. And I had said early on, that's vague. You cannot do it that way. It's going to create a problem. It's chaos. It's worse than I thought, because they did run it. It did pass in the Senate bill. And now we've got our city and CMPD caught up in this quagmire where they've not done anything wrong. They are relying on an interpretation from Representative Sheetzel about what the legislative intent was, but they were never involved in any of the towing legislation drafting or conversations, and it's just wrong. And now what we've got is small businesses impacted, private property owners impacted. CMPD is dedicating anywhere between 1 and 2 hours of officer time to these calls. They've had over 700 calls since they issued their second memo, which, think about the number of hours that takes officers off the streets. No, they're handling parking disputes. And then you've got the number of hours if they arrest the tower, because that's what the statute says, because that's what the General Assembly said was the legislative intent. And then, the core issue then becomes waste of officer time. But also, what does that do to the rest of our streets in Charlotte for a public safety position?
Again, that was my interview with Representative Laura Budd, Democrat from here in Mecklenburg County. Had her on a few times to discuss all things General Assembly. But again, things could change. As you heard from Chris Cooper as well, you never know what's going to happen.
You never know. So what did you learn from today's episode?
Ooh, I think I thought we've had a couple episodes now where we've talked about the legacy of Phil Berger. Yeah. I thought that was interesting too, to get multiple people's takes on what the next few months looks like for him, being such a powerful person on his way out. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I think, I guess I'm sort of surprised at how skeptical Chris Cooper is about anything getting done. I mean, I guess I shouldn't be. At this point, we've learned that nothing is for sure at the General Assembly. But even after 2.5 years, it still doesn't seem like he's convinced there's going to be a budget that happens. And it's like, goodness gracious! Just a reminder: we pay these people's salaries. Yeah. They work for us, and you'd think they might be a little bit more effective and efficient of getting things done. So
somebody filed a bill to stop that pay until they do
something. I saw that.
I would love to be a fly on that wall.
I know, no budget, no pay, or something like that. Yeah, I saw that.
Now, obviously, I'm newer to Charlotte. I've been here covering politics, mostly in government, for almost 2 years now. I haven't seen a budget get passed. I would love to see what that process looks like. I have no idea.
I know.
So, fingers crossed. I don't know that that's going to happen between today, Thursday, and Sunday when this airs. So I imagine that won't be out of date. But
as I always tell people, no matter who you support, you want to support effective government.
Yeah.
And if we don't have that, it's not a good thing. So. All right, folks, hey, that's going to do it for us for this edition of Flashpoint. We hope you join us back here, same time, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Take care.